you know, I like to share this because people always talk to me about, how I got to where I was. A lot of people ask me about the music industry, but then, I have a lot of entrepreneurs that'll reach out and be like, like, how did you kind of start? Or how did you, you know, I'm like, man, like, I tell people, I'm like, do you believe in Jesus? And if you do, the secret sauce is following him.
Hmm.
That's it. There is no like algorithm to this life that makes more sense than that. And in the initial start of it, it's terrifying
Hmm.
because you don't understand because you haven't built that trust, that faith, right? You haven't built that faith, that trustful faith, man, where you're like, please be there. You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean? Please be there. Um, but once you've done a couple things that you're like, wow, I can't believe I just did that. Like dude, it's the people that answer the call to pray for somebody random at the mall or pray for somebody in Walmart
Hmm.
or to, walk over and just be a light to somebody that they feel like God's calling. Those kinds of steps get you to where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just obedience, man. It's submitting our lives, which is actually what worship actually is. Like the real word for worship is proskuneo, and that word means submission,
Yeah.
which means we're just submitting ourselves to God. But like that kind of posture is what has led me to where my faith is today.
I love that.
And there's no like crazy, I don't have like some crazy testimony where it's like, oh, I was a drug addict for 20 years or anything like that. But what I do know is we serve a God who wants relationship with you. In the moment that you bind a relationship with him and you actually start putting that relationship into practice of an actual relationship with, like, we're talking about the creator of all, right? He's created everything. He's not scared of what you're going through because he's already foreseen. He knows everything. He is our father. He knows all the things that we're up against. But the moment that you start exercising that properly, like, your whole life shifts. And I heard that my whole life growing up in church, but it took until that big leap of faith that I really understood what that meant. And I find that people that are struggling with their faith, they typically have not made that leap that looks kind of scary, but God is calling them into.
Yes. Yes.
And so when I talk about my testimony, I talk a lot about the fact that God kind of like told me to jump and I jumped,
Hmm.
Like he was like, listen, I want you to jump, and it's not off a cliff. It's just, I want you to jump as high as you can and check this out. And then all of a sudden you realize like, oh my gosh, I'm on a mountain. Like,
Yeah.
how did I
Yeah.
jump this high? And it's like, well, it wasn't you, but it was the faith that you stood on. And that's where I think that faith of a mustard seed,
Yeah.
it's so tiny. But the moment that you could have just a portion of that, God can do so much with who He's created you to be. And so for me, my testimony has led me to a place where, man, like now today, you know, um, I've dealt with a lot of things like being in Christian music, and all of a sudden, it's like about 4 years ago, I started not feeling like myself, actually 5 years ago now. And I'm like, man, I don't know what's going on with me, but I'm not sleeping. I'm not this, I'm not that. And then that led me down a whole different, place of learning about my faith because I started getting really depressed and I started getting severe anxiety for like, what's going on with me? Like, I'm not this guy. Like, I, I'm like this chill kid from California that
Yeah.
grew up wanting to be a pro athlete or a singer. Like, I'm not trying to like, run a Fortune 500 company. I'm just like, doing what I feel like God's calling me to do. But I started realizing that I was operating outside of the confines in which the assignment that God gave me,
Hmm.
which again, it's learning about my faith again.
Yeah.
It's learning about my relationship with God and what he's put on me, you know? And so, um, I think everybody has a very specific assignment on their life. We're all called to the same thing because we're all called to be Christ followers.
Mhm.
But our assignments look very different. God is going to utilize us very differently, whether it means somebody who's listening is feeling called to be a cashier at a grocery store, or whether you feel like you're called to be in Christian music or a worship leader, or whether you're called to be a doctor or a radio DJ, or, whatever it is, God is going to use you in such a massive and mighty way in that space if you trust him with it. And if you operate in a place that is like exactly where he's actually assigned you to. And so, man, like over the last several years, I've been able to tackle anxiety and depression. And again, it's just, I call it like a chiropractor visit, but it's like the Lord kind of like realigning you and saying, like, here are some things that are way out of whack, like you're posturing yourself in a place where you're trying to fulfill this and not fulfill what I'm assigning you to. Like, don't try to fulfill something that I'm not assigning you to, because then that's when you start down that slippery slope and you're wondering why things aren't going the way that you want them to. It's like, well, they're not going the way that you want them to because they were never intended to go that way. I think oftentimes we can get really caught up in that in our faith is like, I'm going to do what I feel like God has assigned me to, and I'm going to keep doing that. And it's like, but also you can't just do that and not listen anymore. That's you still have to be in relationship. You still have to say, hey, God, like maybe I'm not supposed to do it. Am I supposed to be here? And so, dude, like, we in our family, we kind of pray about everything now. It's like, God, should we be signing our kids up for this camp? Like, is this something we should really be doing? Like, or God, is it, good for us to be, buying this new car right now? Should we be purchasing that, or we really need one? Like, we need a new car right now. Like, our car is breaking down all the time. Should we get one? Like, and you start to see God. And again, it's that practice and relationship. And that's where I find that the people that have some of the most incredible relationships and testimonies with relationship with Jesus, it's never been this one moment.
Mm-hmm.
This one moment, that one moment might have pushed you into a place where now I have open hands, but it's always an accumulation of a million little moments that have led you into a place where I have so much trust and I have so much faith